She wore her worst dress for her father's guest, unaware it was the Alpha King she loved. Leora stood near the tall windows, staring at the horizon where storm clouds gathered like dark armies. Her fingers clutched the hem of her dress, a faded gown with small patches where the fabric had worn thin. It was the one dress she had, and tonight, for her father's guest, it felt entirely wrong. Yet she had no choice. Her father, Lord Velrin, paced behind her, his boots echoing in the marble hallway. "Leora," he said sharply, "you must try to look presentable. The guest arriving tonight is not just anyone. He is important, very important." Leora forced a smile, though her stomach twisted with unease. "I understand, father," she murmured. Her voice was soft, almost lost beneath the distant roll of thunder. She wished she could vanish, hide somewhere behind the manor walls, but she knew that was impossible. Outside, the carriage wheels clattered over the stone path, signaling the arrival of their guest. Leora's heart beat faster, and a strange flutter of excitement mixed with fear stirred in her chest. She did not yet know that the man who would soon step into the manor would change her life forever. The door opened, and the servants quickly ushered the guest inside. Leora caught her first glimpse of him as he entered the grand hall, tall, commanding, and draped in a cloak that seemed to swallow the light around him. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they seemed to look straight through her, reading her thoughts before she could even speak. The room fell quiet as he approached. Leora felt her knees weaken under his gaze. The guest bowed lightly to her father, then turned his attention to the people gathered in the hall. Though he smiled politely, there was a coldness in him, a controlled power that made everyone else seem small and ordinary. "Welcome to my home," Lord Velrin said, his voice formal but nervous. "I hope your journey was pleasant." The man's voice when he spoke was smooth and low, like velvet sliding over steel. "It was satisfactory," he said, his eyes briefly meeting Leora's. That glance, however fleeting, made her heart skip. There was a strange familiarity in it, though she had never met him before. Leora's cheeks flushed. She wished she could look elegant and composed, but her dress betrayed her. It was too plain, too worn, and she could feel every thread's imperfection. She tugged at it nervously, trying to hide behind her hands, but the man's eyes did not waver. There was something in his gaze that made her feel seen, truly seen, even though she had never dreamed of it happening. The dinner was held in the grand hall, candlelight flickering against tall, carved walls. The servants moved silently, placing dishes of roasted meat, fruits, and bread. Leora's father tried to keep the conversation light, but she noticed how careful he was with his words, as if walking near a sleeping dragon. The guest, Erendor, as Leora would later learn his name, spoke little, but every word was deliberate, precise. He asked questions that made Leora's mind race, not simple inquiries about the weather or travel, but about the land, the people, and the strength of one's heart. Each question seemed to pierce through the surface of ordinary conversation, touching something deeper. Leora listened, captivated, though she tried not to show it. She had admired kings and heroes from afar in stories, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of meeting one, especially one who seemed so alive with quiet power. Every movement he made was graceful yet full of authority, every glance careful but penetrating. After a long silence, he finally turned toward her. "And what of you, young lady?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. "Do you find courage in your heart?" Leora swallowed hard. She felt exposed under his gaze, as if her very thoughts were visible. Yet she found herself answering honestly. I try to," she said, her voice small. "Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail, but I never stop trying." Erendor's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "A truthful answer," he said. "Courage is often quiet, hidden in the small choices we make." Something inside Leora stirred at his words. It was not just admiration, it was a recognition, a connection that she could not explain. She wanted to tell him all the things she had kept in her heart for years, but the words caught in her throat. She was painfully aware of her plain gown, her simple appearance, and the way her father's servants watched her nervously, unsure of what the king might think. The evening continued, but Leora felt as though she were moving in a dream. The conversations around her blurred into shadows. All she could focus on was the way Erendor's eyes seemed to follow her, noticing the smallest gestures, the tremor in her hands, the way she hid behind herself. He did not ridicule or dismiss her. Instead, he looked at her with curiosity, as if each moment were a treasure to be understood. When dinner ended, the guests were invited to the manor gardens. The storm outside had lessened, leaving the air thick with mist and the scent of wet grass. Leora wandered near the edge of the gardens, lost in thought, when she felt a presence beside her. "Do you often walk alone?" Erendor's voice startled her, though it was gentle. She turned to see him standing there, cloak dampened by the mist, eyes still piercing but softer than before. "I sometimes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It helps me think." He nodded. "A quiet mind is often the strongest," he said. "It is where we find truth, away from noise and expectation." They walked together in silence for a while, the mist curling around them like a living thing. Leora felt a strange sense of comfort, though she did not understand why. There was something in him that invited honesty, something that made her feel as if she could reveal her deepest self without fear. Finally, she spoke, almost reluctantly. "Why do you look at me as if you know me?" Erendor paused, studying her face. "Perhaps I do," he said quietly, and for a brief moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Leora's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to ask more, to understand, but the words died in her throat. A sudden rustle from the trees made her jump, and the moment shattered. Erendor's eyes darkened briefly, sharp and alert, as though he had sensed danger in the night. "We are not alone here," he said, his voice now low and commanding. "The forest watches and it remembers." Leora shivered. She had heard stories of the cursed lands beyond the manor, tales of spirits and shadows that preyed on the unprepared. Yet standing beside him, she felt strangely safe. His presence was like a shield, strong and unwavering. When they returned to the manor, Leora's father scolded her lightly for wandering in the gardens. She barely noticed, her thoughts still tangled with the intensity of the encounter. Erendor had vanished before she could say anything more, leaving only the memory of his gaze, the echo of his words, and a token left behind on the stone path, a single black feather. She picked it up with trembling hands, noting the strange weight it carried, as if it were more than a feather. It seemed to hum with energy, a quiet power that made her pulse quicken. Leora did not know what it meant, but a chill ran down her spine. That night, as she lay in her modest chamber, the feather resting on her nightstand, she could not sleep. Her thoughts returned again and again to the man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. She wondered about the stories of kings and curses, about destiny and prophecy, about courage and love. She did not yet know that her life had shifted irreversibly, that the moment she had first met him had set into motion events that would test her heart and her strength. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets older than the manor itself. Leora clutched the feather closer, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. Somewhere in the distance, Erendor's presence lingered, a shadow she could neither see nor touch, yet one she already felt bound to. And as the storm broke once more over the horizon, lightning cutting the sky in jagged streaks, a voice seemed to whisper through the wind, barely audible. "The one who wears the rags of her soul shall awaken the Alpha's heart, and the curse that binds him." Leora shivered, though she did not understand the meaning. Yet a strange certainty settled in her chest. Her life would never be the same again. The road to the capital was long and winding, lined with trees that whispered secrets when the wind passed through them. Leora traveled beside her father in the family carriage, the black feather still wrapped in a soft cloth in her pocket. She could feel its faint weight pressing against her chest, a constant reminder of the strange, commanding man she had met. Her thoughts were tangled with his gaze, the quiet power in his voice, and the words he had left unspoken. Yet she reminded herself to focus on her duty. Her father, Lord Velrin, was determined to gain favor at the king's court, and Leora's presence was a small but important part of that plan. The capital appeared at dusk, its towers rising against the fading light. The streets were crowded with nobles and merchants alike, all hurrying toward the grand palace where tonight's ball would take place. Lanterns glowed along the stone streets, casting golden light onto the cobblestones, and music echoed from the distant halls, mingling with the soft clip of hooves and carriage wheels. Inside the palace, the air smelled of roses and burning candles. The walls were tall and lined with mirrors, reflecting hundreds of flickering lights. Servants in silken uniforms moved quickly, preparing for the evening. Leora followed her father through the grand corridors, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. Her dress was modest, and she feared it would make her seem out of place among the polished court ladies. When they entered the ballroom, Leora's heart skipped. Nobles and royals gathered in rich, shimmering attire, their laughter floating over the music like delicate bells. The hall was a sea of colors and movement, each person performing the careful dance of appearances. Leora felt small and out of place, yet she walked with her head held high, determined not to betray her unease. And then he appeared. Erendor stood at the far end of the hall, tall and commanding, cloaked in midnight blue that seemed to swallow the candlelight. Even in a room full of nobility, he drew the eyes of everyone, as if the air itself bent around him. When his gaze met hers across the hall, Leora felt the familiar stir in her chest, a mix of awe, fear, and longing. He did not approach immediately. Instead, he observed, carefully noting each person, each movement, as though calculating every possibility. Leora's father cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, my daughter," he said, bowing low. "She is well, she is here to meet you if you wish." Erendor inclined his head slightly, his dark eyes never leaving Leora. The room seemed to pause as he took a few measured steps forward, each movement smooth and confident. When he finally spoke, his voice carried over the music, gentle but firm. "You are the one from the manor," he said. The girl who wore the simple dress and yet did not hide her spirit. Leora's breath caught. He remembered her. He remembered her courage, her honesty, even in her awkwardness. She forced herself to reply. I try to speak truth whenever I can," she said, her voice quiet but clear. Erendor's lips curved in a faint, approving smile. "And yet, truth is often harder than lies. You have strength that many fail to recognize in themselves." They spoke briefly, exchanging measured words while the crowd swirled around them. Erendor's attention seemed to follow her, a subtle gravity pulling her toward him even as her heart threatened to betray her with its rapid beat. Leora noticed whispers from the court ladies, their curious eyes flicking toward the modest girl who dared to draw the king's notice. She did not care. For once, her thoughts were only on the man before her. As the evening continued, Erendor excused himself from the court's formal dances. Leora's father, proud and anxious, tried to draw her into conversations with other nobles, but her thoughts wandered. The faint memory of the feather, the echo of his voice, and the weight of his gaze lingered in her mind. Eventually, Leora found herself wandering into a quieter corridor, the music and chatter fading behind her. The walls were lined with paintings of old kings and queens, their eyes seeming to follow her in the dim light. She touched one frame lightly, tracing the carved edges, and felt a shiver. There was something about the palace, something alive, almost watching. A soft voice startled her. "You seem far from the crowd." She turned to see Erendor standing at the end of the corridor, cloak brushing the floor, eyes dark and unreadable. His presence was commanding yet quiet, like the calm before a storm. I wanted a moment of peace," Leora admitted, trying to steady her racing heart. The ballroom, it is overwhelming. Erendor stepped closer, not threatening, but with an unspoken authority. The court is many things, he said. It is a place of masks, of appearances. Few dare to show what they truly feel. You do not hide. Leora's breath caught. His words were soft, yet they resonated deep within her. She had spent her life trying to blend into the background, yet he saw her, truly saw her. I do not know how, she whispered. I only am. That is rare, he replied, and dangerous if you are not careful. Courage like yours draws attention from those who wish well and from those who wish ill. Leora's stomach tightened. She had heard whispers of the court's hidden dangers, of those who plotted in silence. Yet standing near him, she felt a strange safety, a protection that no one else could offer. They walked together along the corridor, their steps quiet on the polished floors. Erendor spoke little, yet every word carried weight, and Leora listened with full attention. She noticed the subtle way his eyes scanned the shadows, how his posture remained perfect yet relaxed, and how his presence seemed to quiet the very air around them. You are far from the manor now, he said finally, yet you carry a light there that is not easily dimmed. Do you know it? Leora shook her head. I do not feel that light. I only feel small. Erendor studied her, a shadow of something unreadable passing over his face. Even the smallest flame can cast a long shadow if it burns true. Do not underestimate your own strength. Her heart thudded at his words. There was a tenderness hidden beneath his commanding exterior, a care that few ever saw. She wanted to trust him, to tell him all the things she had never shared with anyone, but the weight of courtly expectations pressed heavily on her. The moment was broken by the sudden approach of a courtier, bowing low. Your Majesty, he said hurriedly, the masked ball begins. Guests await. Erendor nodded once briefly, then turned to Leora. We shall continue our conversation, he said, his voice low. Soon. Leora nodded, her chest tight with anticipation. She watched as he walked away, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow that would not fade. She clutched the feather in her pocket, feeling its strange warmth, and wondered what mysteries this man carried with him. As the ball began, Leora tried to blend into the crowd. She danced with polite nobility, laughed at the right moments, and kept her eyes alert for Erendor. The music swirled around her, the chandeliers casting glittering reflections, but her mind remained with him. Each glance across the hall made her pulse quicken. Each movement of his hand seemed to call to her. Finally, she could no longer resist. She slipped away from the dancers and made her way to the balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The night air was cool and fresh, and the moonlight painted silver patterns on the stone. She breathed deeply, trying to calm her racing thoughts. A soft sound behind her made her turn. Erendor was there, leaning lightly against the balcony railing, eyes fixed on the horizon. The night is beautiful, he said quietly. Yet even beauty can hide danger. Leora stepped closer. I am afraid sometimes, she admitted. Of the court, of the shadows, of everything. He looked at her, and for a moment the stern, commanding king was gone, replaced by a man who understood fear and perhaps shared it. Fear is natural, he said, but it is not weakness. Courage is born when we face what frightens us most. You have more courage than you know. Her heart ached at his words, a mixture of longing and admiration. She wanted to tell him everything, to reveal the depths of her heart, yet she remained silent, knowing words could never fully capture what she felt. The wind picked up, rustling her hair and the folds of her dress. Erendor turned slightly, reaching out but did not touch her. The space between them was filled with unspoken understanding, a bond forming in silence. Then a sudden shadow moved across the garden below. Erendor's eyes narrowed, sharp and alert. We are not alone, he said, voice low. The night carries watchers. The court is never as safe as it seems. Leora felt a shiver run down her spine. The thrill of danger mixed with the intensity of his presence, and she realized that her life was no longer simple. She was caught in a world of power, secrecy, and a man who could command both fear and desire with a single glance. Erendor's gaze softened briefly as he looked at her. Stay close to the light and trust your heart. It will guide you more than any courtly wisdom. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd of masked dancers. Leora stood alone on the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her face, the black feather in her pocket pressing against her heart. She knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and frightened her, that she would see him again. The night carried on with music, laughter, and whispers, but Leora's mind remained with the king, the man who saw her courage, the man who held a strange, magnetic power over her heart. And somewhere in the shadows, the palace itself seemed to watch, waiting for the next step in the game that had begun. The forest surrounding the manor was alive in a way that made Leora's skin prickle. The trees stood tall, their branches twisting together to form dark, endless corridors. Mist rose from the ground, curling around the roots and stones, giving the forest a sense of movement even when nothing stirred. Every step Leora took seemed to echo, and every sound a rustle, a whisper. The distant hoot of an owl felt like a secret being shared with her alone. She had followed Erendor without thinking. His sudden appearance outside the palace had been a mystery, and yet she had been drawn to him, the way one is drawn to a light in a storm. He had moved with purpose through the shadows, silent and assured, as if the forest itself bent to his will. "You should not have come here alone," he said, his voice low, carrying across the mist. Leora started, realizing he had been walking beside her the entire time. His cloak brushed the ferns at his side, and the faint glow of his presence made the dark forest feel less threatening. I could not stay at the palace," Leora admitted, shivering slightly. "I needed to speak with you." Erendor's gaze softened, though a shadow passed over his face. "Curiosity can be dangerous, but so can fear. You are braver than many I have met." Leora's chest tightened. She wanted to say more, to tell him everything she had felt since the first night, but the words would not come. Instead, she kept pace with him, the mist curling around them like a living veil. The path led them deeper into the forest until the distant lights of the manor were no longer visible. The air grew colder, heavier, as though the shadows themselves were pressing in. Leora noticed shapes moving at the edge of her vision, twisted forms that vanished when she looked directly. The forest was alive, not with animals, but with something older, something that remembered the curses of the past. "You feel it," Erendor said quietly, as if reading her mind. "The shadows of this place are restless. They guard what was lost long ago, and they test the courage of those who enter." Leora nodded, swallowing hard. "I feel watched." "You are," he admitted, "but do not fear. Fear is only dangerous when it paralyses. Courage does not mean absence of fear. It means moving forward despite it." His words gave her strength. She kept walking, every step a choice to face the unknown rather than retreat into the safety of the manor. The forest seemed to respond, the mist parting slightly, allowing them passage, as if it recognized the sincerity in her heart. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing where the moonlight broke through the canopy, silver and cold against the dark earth. In the center of the clearing lay a small, ancient shrine carved from stone and covered in moss. Symbols, faint and almost worn away by time, were etched into its surface. "This place," Leora whispered, stepping closer. "It feels alive." "It is," Erendor said, moving to stand beside her. "This shrine holds the memory of a broken trust, a curse that has haunted my family for generations. It is why I cannot love freely, why I carry this weight." Leora turned to him, her eyes wide. "A curse? What do you mean?" Erendor looked at the shrine, his jaw tightening. "Long ago, my family betrayed a bond sacred to the forest and the spirits that dwell here. The punishment was not immediate, but it lingered, shaping the hearts of those who came after. I am bound by it. Love, even when sincere, brings pain to those I care for." Leora's heart ached at his words. She reached out, wanting to touch his hand to bridge the distance, but hesitated. You do not have to bear it alone," she said softly. Perhaps, perhaps the curse can be faced together." Urindor's dark eyes held hers, and for a long moment the world seemed to shrink until there was only the two of them. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of moss and rain, and Leora felt a strange courage rise within her. "You are brave," he said finally, a shadow of a smile on his lips, "and reckless, but that is why I am drawn to you. Most would flee from the forest, from the danger. You do not." Leora's throat tightened. I do not want to flee, not from you, not from this. I want to understand, to help if I can." Urindor studied her, a mixture of awe and caution in his gaze. "You do not know the danger," he warned. "The curse is not simple. It reaches into the hearts of those around me. Even you may be touched by it." "I would rather face it than live in fear," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "If love brings danger, then I will bear it. If courage is tested, then I will stand." For a moment he was silent, and Leora feared she had spoken too boldly. Then slowly he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was light, almost hesitant, but it sent a shiver through her. "You speak with honesty," he said softly. "It is rare. I am not accustomed to this. Few ever see me for who I am, and fewer still wish to stay." "I wish to," she whispered. "I do not know what that means or what the curse may bring, but I cannot walk away." Urindor's expression softened, but the shadow remained in his eyes. He looked down at the shrine, then back at her. "Then you must understand the curse is tied not only to me but to the past. It is older than your life, older than my own. To break it or even survive it requires courage, truth, and sometimes sacrifice." Leora nodded. "I am ready." A sudden movement in the shadows made her gasp. Dark shapes emerged at the edge of the clearing, forms that seemed almost human but twisted, distorted by anger and magic. The forest itself seemed to pulse with hostility. Urindor moved in front of her instinctively, cloak spreading like a shield. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "Do not look directly at them. Their illusions feed on fear." Leora obeyed, holding her breath. The shapes whispered, voices low and cruel, speaking of failures, of weakness, of how love always brought pain. Leora felt the pull of their words, a cold pressure on her heart, but she focused on Urindor, on the steady strength in his stance. "You are stronger than they think," he said, voice low. "Do not let them twist your mind." Together they moved through the clearing, carefully stepping around the illusions, until the shapes dissolved into the mist. Leora's heart pounded, but she felt a new sense of confidence. Facing danger with him by her side had changed something inside her. When they reached the edge of the forest, where the trees thinned and the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Leora finally allowed herself to speak freely. I feel like I understand you now. Not the curse, not the power, but the man beneath it. I see you." Urindor looked at her, his dark eyes softening. "And I see you," he said. "I have never met anyone who could face the fear, the shadows, and still remain true to themselves. You are extraordinary." Leora felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. She wanted to say more, to tell him everything she felt, but words seemed too small for the intensity of the moment. Instead, they stood together in silence, watching the first light of dawn break over the horizon. The forest behind them still held its secrets, its shadows, but for the first time Leora felt a sense of hope. Together, perhaps, they could face whatever came next, the curse, the danger, the courtly intrigues. Urindor finally spoke again, his voice low and intimate. "There will be trials, Leora, trials of courage, of heart, of loyalty, and the curse, it will not wait, but you have awakened something in me, something I thought was long dead." Her heart leapt. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. He nodded, a rare, faint smile on his lips. Together. But even as they turned back toward the manor, the shadows of the forest stirred. A figure stepped from behind the trees, watching them. Its presence was silent but menacing, a reminder that the danger was far from over. Leora did not see it yet, but Erendor did. "They follow us," he murmured, hand tightening slightly. "The past is not yet finished with us." Leora's pulse quickened. She had felt the thrill of danger before, but now it was real, immediate. Yet she was not afraid, not truly. With Erendor at her side, she felt ready to face whatever shadows awaited, whatever curse or secret threatened their bond. The forest behind them seemed to whisper, carrying a warning and a promise. Love, courage, and truth had awakened something old, something powerful, and the path ahead would test them both, not just their hearts, but the strength of their souls. And as they reached the edge of the trees, sunlight beginning to pierce the mist, Leora knew one thing with absolute certainty: her life had changed forever. No matter the curse, no matter the shadows, no matter the trials that awaited. She would not walk away. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the manor, casting long shadows on the marble floor. Leora stood at the edge of the hall, her hands pressed together, feeling the weight of the black feather in her pocket. Last night in the forest had changed everything. The courage she had discovered within herself, the truth she had spoken to Erendor, and the bond that now connected them both. Yet the air was not safe. The shadow they had sensed in the forest lingered, unseen but threatening, like a storm waiting beyond the horizon. The manor, once quiet and familiar, seemed charged with anticipation, every corner hiding secrets, every shadow whispering warning. Erendor appeared quietly behind her, his presence commanding yet gentle. The cloak he wore brushed the floor, dark against the marble, and his eyes held the seriousness of a man who had faced countless dangers, but was wary of the one that threatened the woman beside him. "They are coming," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of truth. "The one who haunts this curse, they will not stop until they have tested us both." Leora nodded, feeling fear and determination mix into a fierce resolve. "Then we face them together," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, yet underneath it beat a wild pulse of courage. Erendor studied her for a long moment, a flicker of admiration and relief in his dark eyes. "You are braver than I imagined," he said. "Even the forest could not have prepared you for this." Their first warning came in the form of a soft rustle in the courtyard. Leora and Erendor stepped onto the balcony, overlooking the gardens, and saw a figure moving among the hedges. Its presence was deliberate, silent, yet heavy with menace. "They test us," Erendor whispered. "They wish to see if fear can break us, but fear is only powerful if we allow it." Together, they descended to the courtyard, moving with purpose. Leora kept her eyes on the figure, alert to every movement, every subtle shift in the shadows. The wind carried a strange chill, and the black feather in her pocket seemed to thrum with energy, as if responding to the danger around them. The figure emerged from the shadows, tall and cloaked, face hidden beneath a hood. Its presence was unnatural, as if the darkness itself had taken form. Leora felt a cold pressure against her chest, an attempt to unbalance her mind, but she remembered Erendor's words. Courage was not absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. Erendor stepped forward, his hand brushing against Leora's briefly, a gesture of reassurance and connection. "You will not touch her," he said, voice steady, commanding. "Leave this place." The figure paused, then raised its arms slowly. Shadows swirled around it, curling like smoke, whispering of failures, regrets, and pain. Leora felt the pull, a cold fear attempting to grip her heart, but she focused on the warmth of Erendor's presence beside her, the strength of her own resolve, and the truth they had spoken to one another. "I am not afraid," she said firmly. "You have no power over me." The shadow faltered at her words as if it had not expected defiance. Erendor's eyes met hers, a spark of pride in the darkness. "Together," he said. They moved forward side by side, and the shadows recoiled. Erendor's power, the strength of his will, surged into the courtyard, intertwining with Leora's courage. The figure tried to resist, its form twisting, but the combined force of their determination pushed it back. The courtyard grew quiet, the whispers fading until at last the figure collapsed into the mist, vanishing as if it had never existed. Leora fell to her knees, breathless, yet exhilarated. She had faced the fear, the curse, and the darkness, and she had not faltered. Erendor knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You were magnificent," he said softly, "brave, strong, fearless. You have awakened something in me as well, something I thought was lost forever." Leora looked up at him, her heart pounding. "What do we do now?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "Is it over?" Erendor shook his head slowly. "The danger may return, for the curse is older than us both, but we have proven that together we are stronger than it. That is the first step toward freedom, not just from the curse, but from fear itself." They walked back into the manor, the sunlight growing stronger as the day advanced. Every shadow seemed less threatening, the air lighter, as though the events in the courtyard had cleansed a part of the old fear. Leora felt a sense of peace she had never known, though she understood that the path ahead would still be full of trials. In the quiet of the hall, they finally spoke freely, the walls no longer feeling like barriers but witnesses to a shared truth. Erendor took her hands in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I cannot promise a life without challenges," he said. "But I can promise that I will face them with you and for you." Tears filled Leora's eyes, not of sadness but of relief and joy. "And I will face them with you," she said. "No matter what comes, we face it together." For a long moment they stood in silence, hearts beating in tandem. The bond between them had deepened, forged through courage, trust, and truth. The black feather in her pocket seemed to glow faintly, a reminder of the prophecy she had heard, the strange destiny that had brought them together. As the day unfolded, the manor slowly returned to normal, the servants moving with quiet efficiency, and her father watching with a mix of pride and apprehension. Leora barely noticed, her attention fixed on Erendor. He was no longer simply the powerful king she had admired from afar. He was the man she trusted, the man she would stand beside, come what may. In the afternoon, they walked through the gardens together, the sun now high, casting golden light across the flowers and fountains. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of roses and earth. Birds sang overhead and the shadows of the trees seemed gentle, no longer threatening. "You have changed everything," Erendor said quietly, eyes on the horizon. "Even the curse, it is not the same as before. You have brought light where there was only darkness." Leora smiled softly. "Perhaps it was always waiting for someone to face it," she said. "Perhaps courage was all it needed." He turned to her, expression tender, eyes holding the depth of emotion he rarely showed. "You have courage and love. Both are rare and both are powerful. With them we can face anything. The court, the shadows, the curse, nothing can break us if we remain true." She felt warmth bloom in her chest, a sense of hope she had never known. "Then we remain true," she said firmly. "Together." Even as they spoke, a breeze swept through the gardens, carrying whispers from the distant forest, as though acknowledging their triumph yet reminding them that vigilance was always necessary. Leora did not flinch. She felt ready, strengthened by the trials they had faced and bolstered by the bond they shared. Erendor gently brushed her hair from her face. "The journey is not over," he said, "but it is lighter now, and we will face the future as one." She nodded, feeling the connection between them deepen with every heartbeat. "We are stronger together," she whispered. And in that quiet, golden moment, the manor seemed to hold its breath, the past and the shadows yielding, if only for now. The prophecy's words echoed faintly in Leora's mind. Even the strongest hearts may tremble when shadows return. She did not fear it, not truly. She had seen the shadows, felt the curse, and faced the unknown. And now, with Erendor by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next with courage, truth, and love. As the sun rose higher, bathing the manor and gardens in warm light, Leora and Erendor stood together, hands entwined, hearts aligned. The forest, the curse, and the past had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, united, and ready to face a world that was as dangerous as it was beautiful. For the first time, Leora felt complete, not because the shadows were gone, but because she had discovered the strength within herself, and the bond of a love that could withstand anything. And though the world would continue to challenge them, she knew with certainty that the dawn was theirs to face together. Word count, tilde 1 615.